It's the big question in global affairs today. What in the world is Vladimir Putin thinking? It may not be answerable by anybody except the Russian president himself, but I find it helpful to talk to people who know Putin, who have worked with him. And my next guest fits that bill. Mikhail Khodorkovsky was a Russian oligarch, owner of a Russian oil and gas company, and at one time, the richest man in Russia. But then he got on Putin's bad side while promoting reforms in Russia and spent a decade in prison for fraud and tax evasion. Charges, he says, were politically motivated. He is now one of Putin's biggest critics and lives in exile in the UK. His new book is The Russia Conundrum: How the West Fell for Putin's Power Gambit and How to Fix It. Mikhail, welcome. So let me ask you first the question I think that is the most urgent and important, which is Putin's threat to use nuclear weapons. He said this is not a bluff. What do you think? Is Putin bluffing?
Putin находится в действительно непростой
Putin
ситуации.
is in a difficult situation now. If he loses in Ukraine, he is going to lose power and also possibly his life. And in this context, his readiness
Любые возможные
to use any method
поражения, она
at his disposal
но
is not a bluff.
при этом то, что он провел
But at the same time, the very fact that he has declared mobilization, this means that
оружия не планируется.
in the nearest future he is not planning to use nuclear weapons, and it is unlikely that this is going to be posed on the agenda in a proper way before the beginning of next year.
But let me just be clear. You're saying that he's now going to try, as it were, to use mobilization and to use these new 300,000 Russian forces to attack the Ukrainians. But you do believe that if that doesn't work and if he is cornered, he could, in fact, use nuclear weapons.
Я полагаю, что если
I think that if mobilization does not yield
победе,
the desired victory,
вопрос о применении тактического
the
ядерного
question of using tactical nuclear weapons is going to be on the agenda.
And when you think about this question, how are you thinking about what Putin's mindset is right now? You said he's worried about losing because if he loses in Ukraine, he would lose in Russia, and he might even lose his life. Explain to me how that would work.
Когда он объявил мобилизацию,
When he declared mobilization, he made a very dangerous step.
дает оружие
He has handed weapons into the arms of ordinary people, common people.
придя на фронт.
Who are these ordinary people? When they arrive on the battlefield and find out what's happening there, they can easily turn their arms against the Kremlin itself. And this has already happened in Russian history before.
100 лет назад.
100 years ago it happened.
The last time you talked to him, you said he told you, it's all right for you to keep doing what you're doing, but make sure your company does not in any way fund the political opposition. And you responded and said, well, the company won't, but I'm not going to promise that any individual will not. What I'm wondering is, tell us what what was he like at that time? Was he threatening? Was it like a mafia boss? Give us a sense of how Putin wields power.
In the Kremlin, during our conversation, it became clear that he had decided to rule the country as one would rule a gang. But at the time, he wasn't a bloody dictator. This happened in front of our eyes. In front of our eyes, step by step, from somebody who violated a sovereignty of a neighboring country in 2014, when he annexed Crimea, from that person, through the person who decided to attack a neighboring country. This evolution has happened from an autocrat via a dictator into a bloody murderer, a bloody assassin.
Do you think people like President Macron and Chancellor Scholz should be talking to Vladimir Putin at all?
Я полагаю, что
I think
диалог
that
необходим,
dialogue
с
is
любым
necessary
человеком, даже если
with
это
anyone,
бандит, взявший
even if it's a gangster who has taken
Тем не менее, мы
hostages.
должны понимать,
Nevertheless,
что
we have to realize
для любого бандита
that for any gangster,
разговор с ним в ситуации, когда он бандит,
a
чувствует
dialogue
себя
with this
сильным,
gangster in a
является
situation when the
демонстрацией
bandit
слабости.
or the gangster feels
Если
that
эту
he has the upper hand,
слабость
is
регулярно
demonstrating your
демонстрировать,
weakness.
то
And
есть
if you
раз за разом
demonstrate your weakness
пытаясь о чем-то с ним
over and over
договориться,
again, trying to
то
negotiate something with
это
this gangster,
провоцирует его на
this
дальнейшие
provokes this
шаги.
gangster
Он
to
считает,
further
что он на самом
attacks, to
деле
further steps,
силен
because
тогда,
they
когда
think
он
that
на
they're
самом деле
strong
слаб. Вот этого,
when
на
they are
мой
in
взгляд,
fact weak.
некоторые
And I
западные
think
лидеры,
this
ведущие
is the
переговоры
problem
с
of
Путиным,
some
не
Western leaders
учитывают.
who are trying to negotiate with Putin and don't take it into account.